kind of didn't. I don't know. I want to go back to it. Ember, yeah. Now that was like the first thing I really tried. But you know, it's so heavy, and I just felt like I was finding the framework and trying to figure out the Ember way to do like whatever I wanted to do. And Angular didn't really have that problem.
The Ember app was working on was consuming a API that's written with Java, like backend.
Sure.
And
yeah.
the person doing the backend was just like, oh, just use this, and it's like now you have to write this way.
Oh right, yeah, because of Ember data, yeah. Otherwise, everything's going to be terrible. Yo, dude, what's with the complete lack of attendance? There were 17 people RSVP'd. 17, yeah. I know, it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. I think it's because my screen. Yeah, it's because it's terrible. Here, we should do the mobile view. It's because of the projector. So there's a couple people on the Hangout, which is cool.
I'm hearing the doorbell ring a lot.
Downstairs, or the Hangout doorbell. Cool. Hopefully it's for our thing and not for yeah, probably for the membership meeting. So 0 viewers. Cool. Working for I tried it. I mean, I'm not sure it's working. It's like 0 viewers. That seems bad, but for some reason on this. Oh, this HDMI plug is kind of cool. Great, awesome. Thanks, Dana. Cool. So we'll get started. Seems like the Hangout's working. So it's very small crowd here tonight, so we might deviate from the expected plan and yes, there is a delay because Google is heavily buffering the stream. I think it's about maybe a 2 or 3 second delay. Cool. Yeah. Okay. So it
has been that
potentially longer.
Yeah. Like I can literally jump in front of the screen, go and sit down, wait,
and then like get back there before. Perfect.
Yeah. It was that.
Cool. So if you're watching the Hangout, hey, that know that your typing will show up on the whiteboard much sooner than you will hear my response to it. So
Have you started yet?
Kinda. Yeah. I haven't seen. No, you haven't missed anything. We're just doing intro. Yeah, of course. Yeah. So first, I want to do intros. So if you're following along at home, if you could type your intro into the whiteboard, that'd be super cool. This is the URL. It's the class page listing at our RailsSchool site. And what I'm looking for is your name, and basically, I want to know how familiar you are with Ruby on Rails in particular, or web development, so I can have a sense of how to plan the discussion. And I'll probably wait for a student to get back. Who won at pool, Donald? Who won at pool?
This person did. Oh, I was like,
Greetings. You guys here for Rail School? Yes. Awesome. Have a seat. We are just getting started. We have some really weird async stuff going on the. Cool. Looks like we have a couple folks from home. Awesome. If you're just joining us and you're at home, please type your intro into the whiteboard and follow Deanna's excellent example. And again, I'm mostly looking for your technical background, but also it'd be cool to know if there's something you really want to get out of tonight. Awesome. So I'll go first. We'll probably have some more people trickle in, but maybe not, because it's really nice outside and it's Burning Man week. So the Python class canceled. I'm Brad. I'm a teacher of Rails School. I've been teaching for about a year. And I use Rails every day at work. And I'm self-taught. I've been doing web development for just a few years. I'm fairly new to it. Like it a lot. And I don't have a CS degree. And I'm not a security expert. And tonight's talk is not at that level. Cool. So, would you like to say?
Yeah. I'm Greg. I'm a full stack web developer for WebPass. My degree was in conceptual information art, which is art and computers. I went to web development. It's fun. But I really enjoy it, and I'm just looking to get out, getting into more security stuff. I have an interest in security and privacy, separated from just my web development stuff, and bridge interests.
Cool. Wow.
I'm John. Mostly working for the last 10 years work support, but I took Ruby on Rails development boot camp a few months ago.
Awesome. Cool.
I've been really transition into some kind of web development. Really trying to sort of run up on security. It's a big thing I think all about the cloud infrastructure people are using and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's important to know that kind of stuff.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, man. So is there anything in particular you want to get out of tonight, or was there anything in particular you wanted to talk about or get out of tonight, or just want to, just in general? Or?
No, I mean,
no, it's okay.
Just,
cool.
I haven't really, I've been studying so much about Rails that how to secure like a Rails app isn't anything I've thought about it, but I wouldn't know where to begin.
Cool. Awesome.
Something like this in there. No, we want me to write a book. I don't have to say about that. Not with a lot. I want to do into the department. So, I guess.
Yeah, cool. Awesome.
How about those?
Donald's another teacher, right? With one class. You taught once.
Hi, I'm Emma. I started a resource project that is written in Ruby 2 months ago, so I'm learning Ruby. So I want to continue learning some Rails as well. And I did the workshop where you were one of the PAs.
Yeah, I feel like it. Yeah, okay. At Railsburg, right? Yeah. Oh, cool. Okay, awesome. At Stitch Fix. Stitch Fix.
Yes.
Donald was a TA too. Cool. Welcome. Okay, awesome. So if you're watching at home, we have a pretty good mix. Looks like we have some pretty experienced developers, and we have some folks that are new, which is awesome. We're going to probably keep it at a pretty basic level, but after we show some of the basic stuff and talk about it. I kind of have, I'm thinking maybe we'll open it up for discussion and talk about some more of the esoteric or technical aspects of securing Ruby on Rails applications. And like the video projector is a little dicey. So does that sound good to everybody? Oh, and I think I'm going to shoot to wrap class up a little bit early today, probably around 8:30. My excuse is I have an infant at home, so I don't sleep anymore. So 9 o'clock is like really late for me. So let's get to it. A couple of different things about the class before we get started. Also, just to talk about RailsSchool. RailsSchool is a free Rails course. It's been going on for about 3+ years in San Francisco. We also have one in Charlottesville, Virginia. And the goal is sustainability, frankly, for teachers, so that we actually do it and it doesn't die. And so far, that's been working pretty well. And one of the key things is we kind of jump around and do topics that we're interested in or are otherwise fun or easy for us to do. So, and also we're here at Noisebridge, and so y'all should think about chipping in $5 or donating or whatever. Space is free and it's awesome, and rent in San Francisco is crazy. So Noisebridge is an awesome resource. And then one final note before we get started is usually I try to teach where we code along, but I gave that up this time because inevitably we get stuck on installing some Jab or setting up a database, and it's super cool in a lot of classes, but for this one I didn't want to waste a lot of time. So if you want to try to code along, that's awesome. There's a GitHub repo up at the top of this. You can clone into this app. You'll want to bundle install. Clone and fine. And that should do it for you. But I probably won't wait, if that's cool with everybody. Seem good? Last time I created a repo and had people clone it, differences between my environment and everybody else's created an epic disaster. So if you can't make it work, it doesn't mean it's your fault. It's probably mine. Hello, you here for RailsSchool? Just checking out? Cool, awesome. This class is about Rails security, not the magic tunnel view. So what I did was I set up a simple Rails app using scaffolding, which I never ever do, but this is a good use for it, to make a basic Rails app that has one thing, users. That's all. So the example is a little contrived, but it's pretty simple. We're using Postgres as a database. And I made, we have a users table here with an admin flag, an email field, and an organization field, because we want to track that. So I'll do a quick tour, but for those of you who know Rails, it shouldn't be terribly familiar. We have a user controller with typical user methods here. And then we have something I added here, if you can see it, which is a custom controller method, because we decided we needed to do this and have this find by organization field. So I added that. I also took some stuff out to make Rails less secure. And any questions so far? Does it seem reasonable to people? Anybody thinking, wait, this is not a Rails app? I'm deeply, deeply confused? No, good. So what did I say in the agenda? I think we're going to do SQL injection first. So does anyone does anyone want to suggest or try to explain what we mean by SQL injection, or have any fun stories about it?
It's not like when hackers are trying to attack things into the browser that will attack your database or something, like get you to drop the database or something like that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. I mean, we use injection because it's like injecting SQL into something you're already doing. But basically, yeah, people can, if you're not, actually, I mean, if you're just careless, right, it can be really easy that you can allow people to execute arbitrary SQL on your machine. So has anyone ever actually executed a SQL injection attack before? Yeah, up until today I had. So I feel like I have to say this, of course. Well, I'm going to show you how to do two things that are very illegal to do under certain circumstances. Yeah, so know that if you try to do this on a website that you don't own and control, you're probably going to be in deep shit really fast.
Oh, you mean like
Yeah, totally. So not that anyone would do that. But for example, I found what I was pretty sure was a SQL injection vulnerability in the Clipper Card website about like 2 years ago, and I sent a couple emails to the people and nobody cared. And it was like really tempting to like see what else I could do, but if I'd have done that, nobody would have cared that I was doing it to try to help them figure out what was wrong with their website, and I wasn't a criminal. They probably would have thrown me in prison anyway. So be really careful with what I'm going to show you how to do, and don't use it for bad things. Because you probably will get caught and you're probably getting a lot of trouble. Even if you just try it, it doesn't work. You can, computer laws are terrible. Yeah.
So like, for example, Facebook
Uh-huh.
is actually really into you hacking their stuff.
Oh, okay.
As long as you don't do it maliciously. So it's like, it's called like responsible reporting.
Okay, cool.
Like that, like, you find a vulnerability in Facebook and like, you tell them about it, and they'll give you like up to $5,000. And they may even hire you if you keep finding vulnerabilities all the time. So, I mean, it's usually by site policy. A lot more big sites are trying to get people to report those vulnerabilities in a responsible way, not use them, do an action mouse and dump the data and whatnot. So.
No, fair enough. That's a really good point. It really matters whether or not you have the website owner's permission to do this or not. And some websites kind of grant blanket permission to do this because they feel it's good.
Yes.
And give a bug bounty, and Facebook's one of those. There's all kinds of really good citizens. Yeah, just be careful. I would say if you don't know really for sure and you're not willing to risk your life's future on your certainty of their good graces, don't do it. But in any case, what I'm going to show you, hopefully you won't be able to break into Facebook with. So if I knew how to do that, I would be cashing in on the bounty. And there seems to be some technical difficulties related to the monitor. So bear with me for a second. Yeah. Does anyone know in Rails any particular places where active record methods that are SQL injection unsafe? Quiz time. Some of them are and some aren't, right? Some are safer than others. Like for example, find, right? You can do find params ID, and it's totally cool. I mean, as long as Rails doesn't F it up. They say it's cool. In a controller or anywhere you want. Oh, .where, yeah, that is, yeah, that's the bad one, right? Yeah, that's what I used. What about? So oh no, not necessarily. So we'll look into this. This was more of a question geared for people who have been using Rails for a while. When you look, basically when we were trying to get information from a database, Active Record has what's called the query interface. And there are methods of very rich API. It's one of the best things about Rails. Very rich API for finding different things. You can be find by name, and some of those methods you have to be careful because they're all vulnerable to SQL injection, but some are not. And so, and we'll look into the difference. And now that the projector is working, let's just get to it. Cool. So the first thing we're going to do here is I have a Rails app running. If you're coding along at home, this is just a simple Rails server, Rails S. I'm of course in this directory. Can you guys see that okay? And then I have a console open here, which you open with Rails C. So that's what I've got going on here. And then we're serving up on localhost, and it's a very simple Rails app, but since we have a users resource, I now have this index action. And I added here a little form. So the use case here really is we have this user index table, and the product management team got to us and we're like, on the users, we really have to have a shortcut defined by organization. And it's Friday at 3 o'clock, and we're like, we want to do this really fast. So we decided to put a form on the index page that allows us to submit to a custom controller action to grab a collection of users based on their organization. Does that make sense? I'm not saying this actually makes any sense to do in the real world, but this is the land of the the beginner class. So let's say I want to look for users that are a member of the RailsSchool organization. I would type this in and I hit submit, and then I see that. Because this is a little janky, I have to hit back. But if I organization foo, I get none, right? And if we had more users,
So that one person is the only one up there.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Let's make another one here, and then we should have cool. Got a foo, we got a RailsSchool. So foo, we get foo, RailsSchool, we get RailsSchool, and bar, we get a big zilch. Cool. Now, interestingly, there's only 2 users listed here, but if we ask Rails how many users there really are, there's 3 of them. It's because in the index page, we've got this tricky security code here that only shows us the non-admin users, because we really don't want our users finding all of our secret admin accounts. That would be bad. Cool. And this is all, I mean, this is not, it is a reasonable thing to do, I guess. Press doesn't work. Here's an example of an active record query method, find by, that is safe from SQL injection, I'm pretty sure. And here we have user ID 2 as our admin user, adminexample.com, who's not showing up. Cool.
So what was it you did before on the last one?
On you mean back here, or
in the action? Did something in the action?
I'm sorry, I'm not. Oh, you mean in the controller?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, right. You mean for the index?
Yeah. So that admin false. What does that do?
That's just pulling all the users where admin is false. So this is saying, hey, give me all the users where the admin flag is set to false.
So is that like some sort of security feature, or that's just what the action does?
I'm making, no, it's not what it does by default. By default, it's this. I mean, it could be whatever you want, right? This is what you normally see in a scaffold application. So we're pretending here in the magical land of insecure websites that we decided that this index is only going to show non-admin users because it's public facing. You'll see why this is contrived. So yeah, there's no objective reason why I would be doing this, but I am. The point is though that really there are many places in a web application where you have a collection of things, albums, notes. Yeah, it is a good example. HR notes, right, on employees, right? and you want to be able to let a user see a bunch of these. Well, you better make sure that you're making sure the user can only see the ones she or he's allowed to see. You don't want Joe being able to figure out how to access the entire company's HR records. That'd be bad, right? And so filtering a collection based on some sort of property of the object is a really common thing to do. It might be publicly viewable, right? Let's say we're working for the Pentagon, so we could do like, reports equals report.where security low. Right, I mean, whatever, right? But that's kind of the idea here. Are you cool with that?
Yeah, that's good.
Sweet. So let's look at what we're doing here with this find by org. Remember, if we look at the index view, I just have a little form tag here. If you're new to Rails, you're probably not used to seeing this as much. You're probably used to seeing form 4. And just note that Rails provides sort of these high-level abstraction for building forms that are kind of composed of lower-level abstractions. So if you find yourself wanting to do kind of custom things, it's pretty easy to do. Although in general, it's a sign you might be doing things the wrong way. Generally in Rails, if you have to go too much outside of the normal established procedures, that's a bad thing. But you can, and it's not always bad to do. So this is what I've done here. A little form that submits, posts this thing into our find by org action, right? And this would be, this is set up in our routes files with this custom route declaration right here. So this is a pretty normal thing to do, right? We're just kind of tacking on this little form onto a view, adding on a controller action to deal with it so we can get out the door. Right, and it's it's cool because maybe product just wants to see it and demo it, and they're not even sure they want to keep it. So done, right? And we decided that we're going to use some straight SQL in our controller action here to take what we get from the form organization and give it to user and pull some stuff back. Oh, you sure? Okay. Sure. Thanks for stopping by though. Yeah, take care. I'll see you around RailsBridge. So here, all we're doing is we're taking whatever people type into the organization field and we're dumping it straight into SQL. And here is where we can have SQL injection. So let's do that. So if we type normal stuff into this field here, we're cool. But if we type certain things, everything goes awry. So if we do this, does anyone want to try to predict what's going to happen? F, okay. Why?
Because the whole true. Yeah, causing the initial your statement and then all true will be true for every user. And the double dash is like to comment out anything else.
Okay. This is because we're just dumping whatever comes in that field into this and feeding it to the database. If the user figures that out ahead of time, he or she could give us a field that is actually legitimate SQL, and this is arbitrarily executed. Interestingly, well, let's do that. We'll do the interestingly thing later. So, and all of a sudden we have our secret admin user given to us. Because it returned all the users. I'm sorry?
How do you prevent that?
Good question. Does it make sense what happened? I want to make sure people have a conceptual model. Yeah, here, I'll show you.
You put some SQL into the form and then it did something.
Exactly. But you can just see right here. This is what happened when we fed that bit. What we gave the form was this, right? And it turns out that magically, when combined with the rest we wrote, turns into valid SQL. And so that's SQL injection. But yeah, you're right. You don't. But it's good to kind of have a sense of it has to be like that valid SQL statement. So you can in generally though, the smell to detect this is stuff like this. You should never ever use string interpolation when making database queries. Like ever, just like don't do it. If you just get in your brain that like this cannot ever happen. If you ever see code like this, it should make you terrified. Then you're probably not going to mess it up. Yeah.
Someone asking if you can share your screen.
If I can share my screen.
Yeah.
No. That wasn't my intent. How long has that been the case, guys? Great. Okay, that should be better. Oh, every time that cycles, I think it flips off screen share. I'm going to assume it's better now. Cool. So, who wants to suggest the first way we're going to fix this? If you guys can't see because you were at home, because I messed up the Hangout. We injected that into the field, and it allowed us to return the entirety of our user table because it turned into that. And now we're going to fix it. And there's a couple ways we can fix this. A couple different ways.
Use find by organization.
Oh, okay, cool.
Since we're only going to be doing everything.
Good one. And you could do this, right?
Yeah.
But that's bad. These are deprecated. These, I believe, actually were vulnerable to SQL injection in Rails 3.2.9. And don't ask me why I know that. Yeah, something like that.
Okay, that's
the new way, yeah. And this would take a string, right?
Yeah.
But you do find by. For those of you who don't know, it used to be that Rails would make these magical methods for you, find by whatever field you had in your database. But they stopped doing that, and now we have one find by method that takes a hash, where it's column name, and then just whatever. Thank you. I do that all the time now. So this should be cool. Does everybody think this is going to be good? So because this is kind of janky, I have to go back. So I wonder what's going to happen when it eats that. And it blows up. And this is probably, it's definitely better than leaking data to the user, I'll suggest. The reason is we got nil back because this thing probably barfed a big exception, or it produced nil. And because we have no users, we can't teach them. So interestingly, though, a tell that a website is vulnerable to SQL injection is if you put in something that's valid code into the field and it throws an exception and does not recover from that gracefully. It implies that somewhere something is trying to execute what you gave it. And again, if you ever find anything like that and you don't have the explicit permission to pursue it, don't. I found that on a website before, and I tried to convince them that it was terrible, and they didn't listen to me, and so I decided I didn't care. Cool. So we're no longer vulnerable, and let's see if it actually just works, though. I mean, does it? Oh, it doesn't work. Okay, so it's probably. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, what did I do? Well, let's do throw a debugger in there. and see WTF is going on.
Oh, yeah, there's now.
Oh,
Returning the relationship, not the.
yeah, right. Okay, got it. Oh, it's returning a sync. I know why. And reprogram, yeah. So it's not returning a collection, it's returning a single thing.
Okay.
Yeah, so this method won't work because find by returns a thing. So if there's more than one
Yeah, that's right.
foo, it's going to return the first one, right?
Yeah.
So can't do it. We could do, I think we can do this. What I do up top, right? Does anyone want to take a guess whether this will work? It's the same thing as this.
So that's just you not doing the string relation, correct?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Where's my index? I'm doing the same thing as right here. It's the where method with a hash. Donald, you think this is going to be safe? I think my debugger is still hanging. Yeah. It seems to work. Yeah, and that actually seems to fail much more gracefully. Not leaking the fact to your potential attackers that you might be doing something bad. Cool. So that's probably the best way to do this here, is to use the Rails way to do things and just F SQL altogether. But there's a problem here also in that if an admin user is a member of organization foo, then we'll get that. So I think we can do that. Yeah, and that should take both of these, I think.
Now, how would you do this if you really need this? If you really some more complicated query that where it's what you need.
Good question. The question is, how do you do this if you actually have to use SQL?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. I mean, you could that's sort of the PHP model, right? You escape it before you feed it in. I had to do this recently. Actually, there was a SQL query that was a very complicated SQL query, where the typical methods didn't work, and I actually elected to not escape it because it's very kind of difficult to do properly. So in that case, in this case, it was actually an ID that was the parameter that was being injected. So people injected into the ID field. So I actually fed it to, I did a user.find, and then took the ID of that record that I found.
And use that.
And interpolated that. But I passed it into active record first, and then had active record bark it back out, which was terrible and ugly. And I rewrote it just the other day to be better. But there's a better way though, we can still use this without having to worry about manually sanitizing it, because this has been done for us, right? Does anyone know? There was sense. There's a fancy name for them, huh? The question mark. Yeah, what's that called? Oh man, this is oh, haha, I win. To be fair, I learned this like a week and a half ago, thanks to Gabe Copley, the founder of RailsSchool, and it saved me a lot of face with the client because he knew the word for it. They're called prepared statements, and there's prepared statements are a SQL thing. They're technical, prepared, but what it means is that you give like arguments like this. Now, this is the Rails way of doing this. Other sometimes I think cache 1 is a more yeah, right, because that looks like awk, but this is the Rails way. And if you had and we could do this too. And then you would give it a second thing like that. So the point of this, though, is that we have a very easy tool to avoid this and use SQL, and it's called prepared statements. So if you ever need to use SQL like this, which is a totally fine thing to do, but if you're involving anything that came from the internet in it, you really need to do it in a prepared statement. And if you can't figure out how to do it in a prepared statement, then I suggest you think harder. But, I mean, there's always going to be a way to do it, right? It might not be as fancy as you want.
There's also block SQL statements, and I don't know how those.
Nope.
So you do like SQL arrows, just in Rails.
Oh, okay. It's a Rails thing.
I made some blocks.
Oh, you can. I mean, you can just feed. You can just like do like active record execute SQL if that's what you mean. Yeah, totally. I don't know if those take prepared statements or not. I mean, I don't.
Or what it does. You give it like raw SQL.
Here we can actually look here. So there's this, right?
Yeah, find by SQL. Yeah, that's it.
I'm going to argue that a lot of these are smells, like doing too much of this like straight SQL things. SQL can be more performant, but you're using Rails, so you probably are thinking about it wrong. Here's the thing: pluck. I believe pluck can be vulnerable to SQL injection. I think I just read that like today. But I might be wrong. Yeah, I'm just curious if. Don't use params and model.pluck. Yeah, so put that on. Oh, reorder. Ooh.
They're injecting stuff in there. It's not just that you can't use the other. They're throwing the programs in there.
Yeah, totally right. But yeah, so you just got to be careful. Like, I mean, but generally there's the pattern, right? Pluck is scary because it doesn't follow the pattern. Because this looks like it's safe. Model, don't use in model find by. Let's see. Yeah, I read this. This is old. Yeah, that was an old thing. That got fixed. But I think that was true. So I think they're wrong. Yeah, and in general rule though, this is the thing you don't want to do. You just don't want to be interpolating your params in a string. So cool. Anybody at home want to say anything on the whiteboard? Where? Yes, I agree. So let's move on to math assignment. Any questions about SQL injection? SQL injection is like the most common security vulnerability in the web. It's very common, and unfortunately, common in production websites, even Rails websites, amazingly. So don't do it, and you'll be way ahead of the game. Frankly, it seems like. Cool. Mass assignment is another one that's largely been taken care of, but I wanted to talk about it just the same. And I think actually, if we have time after mass assignment, I'm going to add script injection instead of, because that's probably the best. So we got a new user form here. Cool. And let's look at the users controller, and we have a create action, and we're doing this, which has been done in like 80,000 Ruby on Rails tutorials all over the planet. And then we had this terrible respond to block that nobody does anymore, but the scaffold thing made. So it should be pretty clear what is going on here, right? We're taking the parameters from the form and creating a new user. So we can do this. And we can create a new user. If we go to users, see admin's false. That's cool. We don't see it, and the reason is because this isn't returning where admin is set to nil. But it doesn't matter for this example. So you can tell I mean, I didn't really pay much attention to how the app worked. I paid more. So we're not seeing this user in the index action because I just added this admin thing and didn't realize that this actually isn't returning what I want. Because when new users, because there's no admin field on the form, the field is being set as nil instead of false, right? And we don't have the admin field on the form for a good reason, because of the following. So let's say, or in our website, that users can update their record, right? Before we get started, can anyone tell me the famous mass assignment hacking that brought all this to attention? Anyone remember that? Anyone at home want to jump in? I don't know what the prize is. The prize is an account at RailsSchool.com, a free premium account. It was GitHub. GitHub got owned by this, and everybody's private GitHub repo is now instantly available to some, probably male, I assume, some gentleman who figured this out, and Rails had been around for 6 years at this point. So here's how we do it. So the idea here is that because we're just dumping the entire params from the user into the user.new action, and we're trusting that a user, we don't want a user to be able to make themselves an admin, right? And we're like, oh, we don't have a form for that. They can never do this. And the thing that we forget is that it's actually trivial for the user to change the HTML because we can't trust anything on the user's computer. And we're going to do that right now. So we are a mischievous attacker who is going to just guess that we have an admin field and it's a Boolean, because that's a pretty reasonable guess for a website, right? And if we just do this, all of a sudden we've added a field to the form. Whoops. And because we're just going to take whatever we get from that form, we all of a sudden have been completely and utterly owned if that that person can now arbitrarily make themselves an admin. And we can see that they did. This is really bad. It's very common. It's generally a bad thing. It can lead to a privilege escalation where now anybody on our website who knows a simple trick can make themselves an admin, which is bad because now they can see all of our private data, right? This would be a terrible thing if you had people's information that you wanted to keep secret. You know, it would be really terrible if the person who was doing this was malicious and wanted to delete all your users, because you would be in a lot of trouble, probably out of a job, and the client would be very, very upset, and you'd feel bad. There are all kinds of terrible things that can happen. So the cool thing is we can prevent this pretty easily. But the other, just to kind of develop your gut sense of where this can happen, right? It's obviously true in any case where you have like a user model. It's a really good place to pay attention to this kind of stuff, because usually users have some sort of privilege or role attached to them. It's very common. Whenever you have that, you need to be really careful about how you're trusting the parameters from any form that can edit or update that user information, right? Another place is your foreign keys, right? It's pretty common. Let's say you have an app and it's for a doctor, and the doctor wants to attach notes to a patient, and you have a form. It's like enter notes for a patient, right? And if you have a drop down, it's like the doctor selects a patient, and the doctor only sees her patients. Cool. Well, what's stopping them from just entering an arbitrary patient ID and attaching a note to some other patient? Right. That's a really good case of SQL or a mass assignment as well too. So it's basically user privileges or roles or foreign key associations. Those are the real two big places where you don't want, it's anywhere that you don't want the user to be able to set the field, right? And so you wouldn't want to be able to change the relationships, and you wouldn't want to be able to change privileges. So there's two ways to do that. I know Donald knows what to do. Any guesses how to solve this? Yeah, cool. No problem. What let's do it. So there is a fancy way to do it, but let's do it simple. So what would be anyone want to suggest a really simple fix?
I guess not having the. I guess if the params is a problem, like maybe somehow just using specifically the fields instead of like the whole params.
You got it, man. That's actually the whole solution. Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. Like you could do things like trying to remove the admin field, or be like params equals, and then like select out the fields. And that's exactly what you want to do, right? You don't want to just blindly accept the entire payload from the user. You want to accept the payload that contains the stuff that you declare explicitly, right? And it should be whitelisted. It should be, if anything's not in there, it's off by default. So by default, none of these fields get through, right? And that's really the way to do it. The older versions of Rails, if you're out there, you will run into, had a completely different way of doing this that had to do with protecting them on the model layer. And so just know that. I'm not going to get into it, but it's called adder accessible. And in Rails 4, everybody moved to doing it at the controller level, sort of a general consensus. And we use a thing called strong parameters. Although note, if you are in a situation where you have a Rails 3 app and you notice that it's vulnerable to mass assignment, which can be quite common in those days, especially before that big high-profile thing, then note that you can use the strong parameters gem in Rails 3 to secure it Rails 4 style. Although, actually, hopefully not many people will be doing that because Rails 3 is going away very soon. So, what's that?
I might work my app with Rails 3.
Oh yeah, well we have clients on Rails 3 too. Rails 3 is end of life when Rails 5 comes out. So in terms of security, also know that Rails 3 hasn't had any patches since January or February this year. And even then it was just urgent security ones only. So yeah, but a good upgrade path. I mean, one of the big breaking changes between 3 and 4, the only one I can think of is the strong parameter sign. So you probably got adder accessible everywhere, right? So, I mean, but you knew about that when you built it, or somebody did. And so it's not insane. And so it should be pretty easy to just write strong parameters, bake that in, test it, and then just move.
When is Rails 5 supposed to be on?
Like next month. Something like that. Yeah. This fall. Yep. I haven't heard any lately. What's that?
That just started on Rails 4, and was that much better?
It's not better. I mean, I don't know what the features are in there. I mean, one of them is like a new API mode that's super cool. But I mean,
so it might be a while for people to actually start using it, right?
Not many people will use it for new projects right away. I mean, I would just use whatever you're interested in, whatever facilitates what you want to do the most, right? It's not bad to use Rails 5 now. It's not bad to use Rails 4. I would suggest not using Rails 3 at this point for new stuff, right? Mm-hmm. you know, check it out. If you're doing something on Rails 4, don't like stop and be like, I have to redo this in Rails 5 because it's the newer thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just adding features on. And Rails 4 is really freaking mature, in my opinion. Like, it's pretty solid. Like, the Rails 5 stuff is more, I think, keeping it competitive and making it an even sharper tool than it is. I really think Rails 4 is like a really, there's nothing about it that I don't like that it really is fixed in Rails 5, in my opinion. I can't really think of anything. Like, if you told me we had to start a new project with Rails 4 instead of Rails 5, I'd be like, whatever. We're like 3 and 4 now, you know, like, you know, I would be, well, you know, I don't know about this. The strong parameters thing is really important. And Rails 4 had some other, like, turbo, you know, but yeah. So what we're going to do is instead of just taking the parameters from the inner tubes, we're going to, what was your name again? I'm sorry.
John.
John, thanks. We're going to do what John suggested, and we're going to whitelist them. So we're going to define a method. And, you know, what we could do is we could do, you know, we could have it take params. And what we want this to do is we want this to return, oops. Right, this is sort of PHP style, right? So we're giving user new the output of our function, and we're feeding our function the params. So now we need to do like clean params equals, you know, email. And there's better ways to do this, but you see my point, right? And then we could do and now we know that anything that we're only using the clean params. Basically extracting the stuff we want, putting in a new hash. Cool.
So that's just like a built-in function to clean params that'll.
Oh no, I just made this. Yeah, I just made. I mean, this is simple. This is like Ruby. This is not. There's nothing Rails about this.
Oh, okay.
So we can be a little more verbose. Safe. Right, and let's name this sanitize. And then we're going to call this sanitize. Right. So I'm just defining a method that's going to take the params in, picking a new thing called clean params, a new hash. It's adding 2 keys to it, and then assigning the value of those keys, the value of the safe. This is from the internet, right? This is the scary thing, right? So we're taking and returning what is now a hash with only 2 things on it. So if this param has an admin, it's going to disappear here, and it's never going to make it to user.new because we're doing safe params. Cool. Does that make sense? Pretty basic Ruby stuff. But what did I do? Did I F it up again? Yeah, right. Thanks, dude. I'm gonna. We should change the syntax. So those are optional. I could monkey patch it. So there's a better way to do this, but I wanted to illustrate the point that like the overall idea is that we just want to select the ones that we want and disregard the, you know, this is just one way to implement it. The cool thing is that Rails 4 has this thing called strong parameters. And we do it in a similar way. We have a method, usually called user params, whatever the resource is underscore params. And we do 2 things. So first we do params.permit user, and we call require on that. Require.permit.
Require first.
permit. And what this is saying, we're going to get a param called user, and inside that, we only want to permit email organization. So now, if we edit this guy, we should not be able to repeat the attack. Cool. Oh. Uh-oh.
Did you call?
Yeah, I did. Did I save? Yeah, I did. Oh, no. Let's see what happened. I have, normally Rails will not let you do it this dangerous way. They require you to do this method. I had to turn something off to illustrate this example. So note that, thinking, oh my God, I'm gonna have to remember to do this all the time. What if I forget? It will complain about something. It will complain. I can't remember what it says, but it will yell at you. So don't worry that it's secure by default. But I wanted to actually do it. Actually,
Because you're putting it out. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, now having successfully implemented the fix. So I should not be able to turn this back to true, right? Everybody agree? So, look outside the box. Yeah, there we go.
So it doesn't shoot an error, but it doesn't like.
Yeah, that's right. It just silently, it's just like whatever. It probably will.
There's no error because it just strips it out.
Yeah, it usually, I think it usually says something on the log. But because I have, because I have that turned off, I think that's why. Yeah, so I had to turn this on, right, in order to make this scary.
So just in general, like that form you just submitted, it allowed the person to submit the form, it just didn't have the desired effect.
Yeah, that's right. The parameters I tried to injected were just ignored because we whitelisted them, as you suggested.
Okay.
And we did it using this like admittedly magical syntax here, which is what we do now, but is in a lot of ways not really necessary to like truly grok. You just kind of need to understand that you never trust parameters from the internet in a form. You need to whitelist them all, no matter what. And Rails has an easy facility for doing that. And all you need to do, I mean, I do this all the time. You can see I can't remember the syntax. You just like Rails, like whitelist controller parameter. I mean, that has like, that's not what we call it, but I bet it'll, yeah, I mean, here we go. Probably, yeah. you know, Rails, mass assignment. I mean, any one of these like search queries is going to get you what you need. So the important thing is just remember, making forms, do not just take the parameters and give them to the database or whatever, because you'll let people set stuff. You want to whitelist them and only let people set the stuff that you want them to set. Right? And the things that you will probably not be whitelisting should include, you know, security-related fields, foreign keys, things like that, right? And I mean that's worth a discussion a little bit, because it's kind of a common question, right? Like let's say we have the doctor with a patient and notes attached to each patient, and we want the doctor to be able to create notes for any one of her patients. But how do we make sure that she can't create a note with an ID of patient 18, which doesn't belong to her? If we go this method and leave the patient ID out of the controller action, the doctor won't be able to create any notes, because the doctor has to be able to tell us which note the patient's for. Right? Anyone solved this problem before? Have any suggestions for it? This is a really common question, right? Is if we take the patient ID out of the user params, there are some cases where a user should actually be able to set that in a form. Maybe some of them.
Be able to do it even for a patient that could. Supposed to.
Exactly, right? Yeah, so this approach won't really work for that case. It works for some things. It works if you never, ever, ever want to let the person set that. But what if there's some cases where they should be able to set it, but there's actually a lot of cases where they can't?
When you say ID, do you mean the ID of the patient, like database level, or just a generic ID that the company might have?
Yeah, the ID, yeah. So this would be in the notes controller, right? It'd be create, and you'd want to figure out what patient to associate the new notes with.
It would like be an ID that was created by them.
No, it'd be the patient ID, right? So there's a drop down of like 8 patients.
I think what he's asking is, when you're saying ID, you mean the actual ID that the database creates? Because most databases create an ID.
Yeah.
But it might not necessarily be that it's like a generic ID that's created for each patient. Well, maybe it's both. It could be, I guess, there might be situations where both are the same.
Does that make sense? Right? The foreign key.
All right.
I'm trying to think how I solved it, to be honest, and I can't remember exactly. Yeah, so there's one thing you could do down with right. You can implement a before filter, which is a way to tell Rails, hey, before you do this action, execute this code. And you could check to see if the patient belonged to the doctor. It's like a pretty typical thing, actually. Does that make sense? Like you could even define a method on the patient that was like, you know, or the doctor that was like, can access this patient, and feed the patient ID, and that would return yes or no. Yeah. You could also commonly solve this problem with libraries such as Pundit. To kind of take that idea a little bit further, really we're talking about kind of roles and authorization at that point, right? Because in our application, we're also probably going to have admins that can see all the notes, because they're our database administrators, right? And our DevOps team, and like tech support and help, they need to see everything, right? So, and maybe some people need to see a lot of everything. So you quickly end up getting pretty complicated. So one thing to mention as we're thinking about like what attributes people can do and what they can't, just know that in addition to this, which is really important, this really is pretty crude. It's just kind of a binary. It's like yes or no. But once we need to get what we're saying, yes under the right circumstances, then it's probably time to think about, it's time to definitely stop and think about how you're going to solve that problem, in my opinion. But the good news is that there are really great patterns for doing this, and Pundit is a great one. Can is deprecated, but there's also can. I don't really like can. I wouldn't use it, but it's worth, if you know it, you know, it's definitely an option to look at. There's some new ones too, like right. Seems like there's a bunch of them coming out. I just can't say enough about Pundit though. Pundit's wonderful. Has anyone used it? Yeah. The pitch for Pundit is that it's incredibly tiny, and it would not be very difficult to implement this yourself. I mean, like you could probably, if you knew the pattern, then you could implement it in a day, I would think. I mean, it's really simple, and that's really good. There's very little magic, but it's very powerful. I find it's probably as easy or easier to use than CanCan, and it's like a tenth of the size. So it's pretty cool. So I definitely strongly suggest checking it out. And I mean, we can see, let's kind of look at deviating a little bit, but not that big there. And there's some other stuff. Policy Finder. I mean, and then actually I haven't even. I never used the generator. So like the guts of Pundit is like this, and another like 75 line file. It's pretty cool. I couldn't do that. If I implemented this, it would be longer than that, but by a lot. But anyway, there's something to think about. So cool. So let's talk about one last thing. And is there any messages on the whiteboard? Everybody okay? Cool. And I said we were going to talk about cross-site scripting, but I don't think we're going to talk about that because that is really not a problem in Rails. It's everything's automatically taken care of. So, right? You want to disagree? Cool. Let's talk about CRSF tokens. So, it's close enough to. See, you don't need to know what the right name is. It stands for cross-site request forgery. But let's look at it first here, and let's see what let's look at the edit form. So if we look into this, we see our form actually has 3 hidden fields. One of them is this thing called authenticity token that we didn't make. That is added. These are added for us magically by Rails. I think if we refresh, should it have a different one? Yeah, we get a different authenticity token every single time. And if we were to edit this authenticity token, theoretically, we should not be able to change this. Has anyone actually ever tried this? Because I've never tried this. I just assumed this was true. Maybe we'll find out Rails is all a big lie. Let's do it here. Yep. Okay, good. So it barfed. And because it can't verify the CSRF token authenticity, because the token we passed back was not the token that Rails gave us. So what's going on here is that for every request with the form, when you ask for Rails from the form, Rails says, here's a secret token. If I don't get that token back, I'm not accepting your form. Does that make sense? This is when you're building sites with Rails just generally, like CRUD sites like this, you never have to worry about this because it just happens automatically by Rails, and it's one of the nice things. But if you're building a site with a JSON API, then this becomes a big pain in the arse because you have to make sure that you get the token from Rails and you give it back to it in JSON in the exact magical way that it expects it if it was doing it itself. Rails is not really that good at the moment about grokking that it's an API, right? Unfortunately. So, in Angular, I know you have to actually like set a freaking header or deal with a cookie or something like that. And it's annoying. So a lot of people turn it off. And it's weird. You'll see, this is kind of mind-blowing, but I mean, well, these all seem to be somewhat skeptical of it. Yeah, but it's kind of like, okay, just turn it off. Well, that's for create, right? Or disable it for everything except if you message. I see a surprising, like if you posted something on Stack Overflow that was like vulnerable to SQL injection, everybody would be like, no. But if you posted like, how do I turn CSRF tokens off in an API? They're like, here, which I find sort of odd. And people turn this off all the time because it's really hard to get your authentication working.
There's no solutions for it, I guess.
What's that?
There's no solution for it.
Yeah, in my opinion, there's no good solution at all. Yeah, I actually think like Rails API authentication in general. Yeah, a lot of that stuff is broken, right? Like the authentication, I think the CRSF token stuff. It's just so. Does anyone want to take a stab at why this matters? No. Here's what I'm trying to get at, and this is what I don't understand. So let's pretend we didn't have the CSRF token. Cool. And that would mean that Rails would be accepting any parameter from the internet, because Rails is kind of blind, right? It's just listening. Things just come at it. It doesn't know that when Donald asks for a form, that 3 milliseconds later, the request to create a new note for a patient actually came from Donald. That's broken without the CRSF token. But the thing is, though, if, let's say, someone tries to hack in and trick the server into creating a note for Donald, it shouldn't work because they shouldn't be logged in as Donald, right? Let's assume we have everything else locked down. The action makes sure Donald's authorized to create a note for this patient that he's logged in. How can you actually get Rails to accept a post from the internet? Because you can't. Like if you try to just like send a post action into a properly built Rails app from curl, it'll reject it, right? So why do we need the token? I don't totally understand it myself. I'm actually kind of asking.
The token is supposed to be to verify that it's coming from the user, the particular user. Because I think
The sessions do that though, right?
that's the problem is the session. Because when you log in initially and you source the session, so every request coming from you, it verifies the session.
Yeah.
So the thing is, I think it only happens like if you log into a website and like you have the session with the server, and then like say on a different tab or something, someone gets you to click something on.
Right.
Then
You have to hijack the session, right? Okay.
If they hijack your session,
right,
then they can send then when they make a request to the server, the request is going to go with your session ID, and the server will verify you with the session ID, and then
you're done. Yeah, right. Cool. That's what I thought. That's what I was going to add. Did you get that?
I'm just Stack Overflowing.
No, that's cool.
And
Might be a little bit. Did you get that? It might be a little bit. It would have been over for my. Don't worry. Yeah.
Yeah, like somebody's suggesting that for API requests, there's no state to begin with, so what's the hijack? Which I kind of understand, and then this link is actually grabbing the SRF token from the DOM.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Just doing that.
Yeah.
So that seems like if you still care about CSRF tokens, you can just do that. Grab the jQuery.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there is no state, but there's no state in HTTP states. Like it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't understand. Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that if you have an app that, I mean, it depends what your API is, right? I mean, if you're just like accepting these note payloads.
Then, like, say you're authenticated already with the API.
Yeah.
And that means you're getting requests from the server because why? why are we okay in that state? So you log into an API, and then, so you're getting requests, you're using an app. Why are we okay in that state?
Without CRSF token?
Yeah.
I don't think we are. Yeah, I don't understand why you would be. Because you would still be the vulnerable session
like
hijacker.
Twitter API.
Uh-huh.
I log into it with a token and all that, and then I have a session with them. So I'm still using a token on every API call.
Yeah, so it's
How are
different.
we doing that in this? It's like,
That's a good question, right? I mean, if someone hijacked your session or stole your token, they can make requests.
Okay.
That's a good question. I mean, it may be that one thing is that that's a good question.
Yeah. It seems like grabbing it from the bottom is like a good solution, but like another solution would be like, why don't we have session tokens for our APIs?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think some you have to send the token with every request, right?
I mean, yeah, it's like Twitter's like that. Yeah.
Some you have to have a session. I mean, sessions I think work differently than token based auth.
Yeah.
But I don't know for sure. I mean, the big point is that it's certainly not going to hurt you to keep it on. And you can do it a lot easier than using jQuery too. You can actually, there are some shims you can put in the controller to expose it, because Ember Ember I think expects these things, right?
Yeah.
Ember expects a CRSF token, I think, and Angular I think will too. So you have to write some sort of adapter layer in your controller usually. Well, the take-home point really is that this is something to be aware of when you're building an API. You probably will run into this issue. You'll see this cryptic can't verify C SRF token, you got WTF, and you're going to be tempted to turn it off. And I definitely strongly suggest you not do that, and you work through the issue. That being said, it does require the user session to be hijacked to exploit this.
The way hijacking user session, maybe somebody leaves their desk and then you walk up to their desk, or what exactly do you mean by?
Well, like Donald said, let's say you've got a tab open and you're transferring a lot of money between your Caribbean bank accounts, and in the other tab you're clicking through some porn sites because you're I don't know, I'm trying to be stereotypical funny, but right, and you click on this link that actually has some embedded JavaScript, which now totally hijacks all of the cookies that were on your browser. One of which was your little secret token to give back to your bank to say, hey, I'm Donald. I'm still Donald. I gave you my password a minute ago. Remember me? Now they have that, right?
Okay.
And so now they can be like, and now they send a request that Donald doesn't know about that says, hey, bank, wire $10 million to this bank account. Right? It's kind
they
of
basically have a copy of whatever tab he had open, and it has access to whatever.
Yeah, it's told us. Another way you could do it is you could do it in a coffee shop with a man in the middle. So
You're not using an assistant inspection.
Probably the most common. Done. Yeah, done. Yeah. So
I think it's not so much that they still what's they can't really see still what's in your
tab. That's correct. Yeah.
or still
they have to
your
have the URL.
CSR token. It's more that they get you to execute something like they have say a link there.
Oh, and they just get some JS to post.
You click the link,
Got it.
you click the link. So the thing is now it's the code that they have in there like to submit the request. It's like it's coming from you now.
Got it.
When so they'll have like say a link to the whatever say your bank account. And when you click on the link and hit the browser tries to submit the request. And this is what happens with the session is if you're sending every request sends over your session ID. So they don't know what your session ID is, but when you click on that link and the browser tries to go to that link, the browser will automatically include the session ID.
Yeah, so they own it.
Then it looks like.
Got it. Oh,
So
okay.
if
Oh, I see. I see what you mean. I
that's
see
where
what
the
you mean.
CSR token comes in.
I see
If you click on that link is not going to have your CSR token. That's how
It's done. Got it. Yeah, does that make sense? So let's say you notice the Wells Fargo Bank, the form URL for sending money to another customer is this predictable thing with an ID up front. Well, you can send an email to 10 million people. It's like click here, and you embed a link in that that's to your account. If a couple of those 10 million people happen to have browser tabs open at Wells Fargo at the moment they click on your email, they would send you money. Now, with CRSF token protection, they wouldn't, because the bank would realize that that request was not coming from a form that they served the user, it was coming from some other mysterious source. So the big thing is that it makes sure that API requests are, it has another layer of protection, right? Every time you get a request from a user to create something or do something in your app, you're going to do a lot of things, right? Is the user logged in, right? And all this happens automatically, right? For the most part. Is the user logged in? Does the user have permission to do this, right? But one of the things you also want to check is this request to change data coming from a legitimate, action, right? The result, or is it just coming randomly? And I mean, one problem with APIs, I think, with at least CRSF is how do you do that, right? If the Twitter API just accepts random posts, you'd probably have to implement you'd have to be get one-time token from Twitter and then just pass. So you'd have to do 2 calls for every post. So maybe that might be practical. I mean, maybe those things aren't subject to session hijacking as much because you're not I don't know.
Yeah. I think those.
There's an interesting link from.
Those is probably. I mean, when you're dealing with the API from Twitter, the token that you resolve is, I think it's just about all the verification. So if someone gets it over them.
Oh, you're done.
Yeah, exactly. Totally.
Yeah, cool. So we got a cool post. This looks like what you would do if you were writing some AJAX stuff in jQuery, which is pretty. Just glancing at it, yeah, this seems like the pattern I was seeing. You just take the token that you get from Rails, or no, this is actually taking it from the post. For the DOM, yeah. This is your approach, yeah, totally. Oh, was that you that posted this? Yeah. No, that's cool. Yeah, okay, awesome. Yes. So.
But yeah, you scroll up. Make sure that you have, percent sign equals CRS at meta tag. Those down there.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, so this would be what you do if you had a little AJAX form and you wanted to send. Yeah, totally cool. In Angular, there are these gems that supposedly make it work. But you can also do this, which is you can take the form authenticity token that you get in the controller, because the controller is generating this, and then set it to a header. And then there's this kind of magic that monkey patches a lower level action to kind of override it. So, and then in Angular, sometimes you have to do some stuff. So the point is that it can be a pain, but persevere. I kind of think it's a really good thing to do. But so it, I guess you can use your judgment.
I think that's why the pretty common thing to put
in the header. Yeah, I mean, this is not like heavy engineering, right? Like it shouldn't be something that gets in people's way. But I had an app where I had this working in Angular, and then just one day it just stopped, and we have no, I didn't know why, and I was like, WTF, my app is totally broken, and it's like, turn off. It's really a bad idea. Yeah, it's a really bad idea. So. Cool. Well, I think I'm going to wrap up pretty soon here, y'all. Make it a shorter Rails school tonight. But any last-minute questions or other security-related things we should discuss? One thing that really I should point out is I already have this in the course description. This Rails security guide thing here, you should just read it. You really should. It's really short. Well, I mean, it's short for a Rails guide. Donald has read all of these. Oh, okay, it's not really short. But you should read it. Not memorize it. But you really should see what the types of things there are out there. What kind of exploits? What are the most severe ones? What are the not most severe ones? File uploads. captchas, your passwords, regular expressions. And just remember to take this stuff into consideration. And of course, I mean, the one final note is probably like realize that you're on the web and things are going to be insecure. So if you have sensitive data, it needs to be properly secured by either encrypting or, ideally hashing it, especially for passwords. Right? Passwords never should be stored plain text ever, under any circumstances. And yeah, that's right. Yeah, nor credit cards.
Actually,
You shouldn't store credit cards at all unless you're insane. Yeah. I tried to become compliant with the standards for that once, and it was very hard. Yeah, don't store credit cards. Just pay for service that does that, and make sure if you do have to store passwords. And the big thing to note is that you want to be hashing those passwords, not encrypting them. And the really big point there is you should not roll your own authentication. And I think that is kind of a big take home. Like this kind of stuff is not the place to reinvent the wheel on a site that you care about. It's an awesome place to reinvent the wheel on a site you don't care about because you learn a ton. But anything having to do with logging in, securing data, authenticating people, use a big, boring approach that other people use, and you'll probably be totally cool. With Rails, the more you swim against the grain and do things differently than the majority of people, the more it should kind of alarm you and make you think that something's wrong. And the more security issues you're going to come into, the more issues in general you're going to have. So you keep it boring, Rails is going to do a really good job of keeping you safe. I think the exception is the SQL injection. I think that's the one thing that you just really need to know. But you're not going to mess up with strong parameters. If you use a normal authentication library, you're not going to mess up with the passwords. You don't turn off CRSF protection, you're not going to mess up with that. So, cool. If you're at home, thank you for joining us. And